A single pregnant mother enrolled her son in the same school as the daughter of a billionaire. When they met, secrets came to light, and fate took care of the rest, changing their lives forever. A story of love and second chances that will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment on where you are watching from. The March rain drummed insistently on the roof of the crowded bus that cut through New York City on that grey Monday. Sarah Johnson, 28, adjusted her worn bag on her shoulder for the 10th time while holding tightly to the small, sweaty hand of Ethan. The 7-year-old boy gazed out the fogged window of the public transport, his dark eyes shining with equal parts curiosity and nervousness. "Mum, what if they don't like me?" Ethan's voice was low, almost a whisper, lost in the noise of the bus engine and the chatter of other passengers. Sarah felt her heart tighten. She knew that fear, that insecurity that came from growing up, knowing you didn't belong to the same circles as other kids. She crouched down to be at her son's level, her work-worn hands gently touching his face. "Ethan, listen here." Her voice was firm but filled with tenderness. "You are smart, kind, and have a heart as big as the world. If they don't like you, it's because they don't know how to recognize a special person when they see one." The bus stopped abruptly on Fifth Avenue, and Sarah felt a twinge in her lower back, a consequence of long hours of work and the pregnancy that was beginning to show a small curve in her belly. At 6 months, she could still disguise it well with loose clothing, but the back pain and constant fatigue were already faithful companions. They got off at the stop near St. Teresa Academy, a century-old institution that stood majestically among leafy trees, its exposed brick walls and large stained-glass windows contrasting dramatically with the commercial buildings around. The wrought-iron gate was open, revealing an inner courtyard with well-kept gardens where uniformed children played under the supervision of staff. Sarah paused for a moment on the sidewalk, observing that world that seemed so distant from her reality. Elegant mothers stepped out of imported cars, handing expensive brand backpacks to their children before heading off to commitments in high-rise offices. Some were accompanied by uniformed nannies carrying elaborate snacks in colorful containers. "Mom," Ethan tugged at her hand, "is everything okay?" She took a deep breath, smelling the rain mixed with the fragrance of the flowers in the school garden. For months she had battled bureaucracy, filled out forms, proven income, participated in interviews, and waited in endless lines to secure that full scholarship. She wouldn't give up now. "Everything is perfect, my love. Let's go in." The entrance hall of the academy was impressive. Polished marble floors reflected the light streaming through the large windows. Framed photos of distinguished alumni adorned the walls, and a crystal chandelier hung from the high ceiling. Sarah felt small in that environment, her simple but always clean and well-pressed clothes seeming out of place among so much luxury. "Johnson family." A soft voice caught her attention. They turned to find a middle-aged woman, her hair pulled back in an elegant bun and a professional smile. She wore an impeccable navy blazer and carried a brown leather portfolio. "I'm Margaret Smith, the academic coordinator. You must be Sarah and Ethan, right?" "Yes, that's us." Sarah extended her hand, noticing how the coordinator's was soft, lacking the marks of hard work that characterized hers. "Great. Ethan, are you ready to meet your new school?" Margaret knelt to speak with the boy, who nodded shyly. "Shall we take a quick tour before we officially start tomorrow?" They walked through the wide corridors, passing classrooms with modern equipment, science labs, a library with floor-to-ceiling shelves, and a covered gymnasium where excited shouts echoed from a physical education class. "Our school has a very special educational approach," Margaret explained as they walked. "We believe that each child has their own learning pace, and we work with small classes to provide individualized attention. Ethan observed everything with wide eyes. In his previous school, a public institution in the outskirts where he had studied until then, the classrooms were cramped, with old desks and a chalkboard that had seen better days. Here, even the smell was different, a mix of furniture polish and new books that spoke of care and investment. "And Ethan's class is very special," Margaret continued, stopping in front of a door with a colourful tree drawing. "They are very welcoming children. I'm sure he will make friends quickly." Sarah felt a mix of relief and anxiety. On one hand, she was grateful for Ethan to have this opportunity that she could never afford. On the other, she feared that social differences would create insurmountable barriers for her son. "Is there anything we need to know about Ethan?" Margaret asked, consulting her portfolio. "Any learning difficulties, food allergies, special family situations?" Sarah hesitated. Should she mention that she was pregnant? That she worked as a cleaner in 3 different places to pay the bills? That Ethan's father had never taken responsibility for the boy? "Ethan is a very responsible child," she finally said. "He helps a lot at home. Sometimes he may seem more mature than other kids his age." Margaret nodded in understanding. She had worked in education for decades and knew how to recognize the signs of a child who had grown up too fast, taking on responsibilities prematurely. "Here he can be a child," she said gently. "That's what we want for all our students." They finally arrived at the 2nd grade classroom, where about 15 children were sitting in a circle on the colorful rug, occupying one corner of the room. The teacher, a young woman with a warm smile, was leading an activity. Presentation. "Class, do you remember I said we would have a new friend today? This is Ethan." Sarah observed the children's reactions. Most smiled and waved, some looked curious, while others seemed indifferent. But one girl in particular caught her attention. Sitting a bit apart from the group, she had brown hair tied in 2 braids and green eyes that seemed to hold an unusual seriousness for her age. When Ethan shyly waved to the class, the girl's eyes lit up with something Sarah couldn't quite define. Recognition, perhaps. "I'm Emma," the girl said, getting up from the carpet and approaching Ethan. "Do you want to sit here next to me?" Ethan looked at his mother, who nodded encouragingly, and joined the circle. Sarah watched, emotional, as her son quickly integrated into the activity, responding to the teacher's questions with the sharp intelligence he had always shown at home. "He'll be fine," murmured Margaret beside Sarah. "Some kids have a natural ease in adapting." Sarah nodded, but she couldn't take her eyes off Ethan and Emma, who seemed to have established an immediate connection. They whispered to each other, shared school supplies, and laughed at jokes that only they understood. It was as if they were old friends, reuniting after a long separation. "Emma has been our student for 3 years, commented Margaret, following Sarah's gaze. "She's a very special girl, but sometimes a bit lonely. It's nice to see her connecting with someone like that." The bell rang, signaling the end of the observation period. The children got up to organize themselves for the next activity, and Ethan ran over to his mother, his eyes shining with excitement. "Mom, can I come back tomorrow? Emma showed me the library and said there's a book about dinosaurs that I need to check out." Sarah laughed, feeling a wave of relief. "Of course you can, my love. That's what we're here for." As they said their goodbyes and walked back to the gate, Sarah couldn't help but notice an elegant woman waiting next to a black luxury car. She wore a beige silk blouse and tailored pants, her blonde hair tied in a low ponytail, expensive designer sunglasses. Even from a distance, she exuded the confidence of someone who had never questioned her place in the world. The woman waved to someone approaching, Emma, who ran towards her with an energy that contrasted with the reserve she had shown in the classroom. "Mom, I met a new boy today. His name is Ethan, and he's really cool." Sarah observed the reunion between mother and daughter, noticing how the woman bent down to listen to Emma with genuine attention, her manicured hands gently touching the girl's face. For a brief moment, their eyes met across the yard. The blonde woman took off her sunglasses, revealing green eyes identical to her daughter's, and looked at Sarah with a curiosity that seemed mutual. It wasn't a look of judgment or disdain as Sarah had feared. It was more like the recognition of two mothers who, despite different worlds, shared the same dedication to their children. Emma tugged at her mother's hand, excitedly pointing in Ethan's direction, who was still walking hand in hand with Sarah. The woman discreetly waved, a gesture that Sarah returned with a small but sincere wave. "Mom, who is that lady?" Ethan asked, noticing the silent exchange. "She's Emma's mother," Sarah replied, still processing that moment. "And something tells me we'll get to know her better soon." As they walked down the street towards the bus, "Stop!" Sarah felt a mix of hope and apprehension. Ethan had found his place in this new world with an ease that surprised her. But she knew the challenges were just beginning. The scholarship was only the first step of a journey that would test not only Ethan's adaptability, but also her own courage to navigate unknown territories. The rain had stopped, and some rays of sunshine began to break through the heavy clouds. Sarah squeezed Ethan's hand and smiled. Perhaps it was a good omen for what was to come. 3 weeks had passed since Ethan's first day at St. Teresa Academy, and Sarah had established a routine that constantly tested her physical limits. She woke up at 5 in the morning to prepare breakfast and lunch for her son, dropped him off at school at 7:30, and went straight to her first job of the day, cleaning the offices of Mendez and Associates, an accounting firm in downtown. That April morning, while scrubbing the marble floor of the reception area, Sarah felt the familiar twinges in her lower back intensifying. She was entering her 7th month of pregnancy, and her body was starting to protest against the long hours of intense physical work. But stopping was not an option. She needed every penny to ensure Ethan had everything he needed at his new school. "Sarah, are you okay?" asked Mrs. Johnson, the cleaning supervisor, a woman in her 50s who had become a sort of surrogate mother to Sarah during the 2 years they had worked together. "I'm fine, Mrs. Johnson. Just a little tired." Sarah leaned on the broom handle, trying to disguise her discomfort. "Girl, you need to take care of yourself. That baby needs a healthy mom." Johnson approached, her brown eyes filled with genuine concern. "How many months along are you?" 7 months next week." Sarah ran her hand over her belly, which was now impossible to hide completely. "And how's Ethan? How's he adapting to the new school?" Sarah's face instantly lit up. It was amazing how talking about her son could push away any physical discomfort she was feeling. "Mrs. Johnson, you have no idea. He came home yesterday saying the teacher praised his writing in front of the whole class, and he made friends with a girl named Emma. Seems to be special." "Special how?" Sarah paused, trying to find the right words. You know when you meet someone and it feels like you've known them forever. That's how Ethan describes their friendship. He said it's like she's a sister he never had. Mrs. Johnson smiled, wiping her hands on her apron. "Sometimes fate puts people in our path when we need them the most." Meanwhile, a few miles away at St. Teresa Academy, Ethan and Emma were sitting side by side during recess, sharing a snack that Emma had insisted on dividing with him. It was a habit that had developed naturally. Emma always brought too much food, prepared by her family's cook, and Ethan, who brought simple sandwiches made by Sarah, never turned down the treats his friend offered. "Ethan, can I ask you something?" Emma looked around to make sure no one was listening. Her braids swayed as she leaned in closer. "Of course, you can ask anything. Your mom works a lot, doesn't she? I see how you worry about her." Ethan thoughtfully chewed a piece of the turkey sandwich Emma had brought. It was a question that other kids had asked before, some with genuine curiosity, others with a tone he didn't like. "My mom is the bravest person I know," he finally replied, his voice filled with pride. "She works hard because she loves me, and she's going to have another baby soon, so she's working for the baby too." Emma's eyes widened. "Your mom is having another baby? That's cool. You're going to be a big brother." "Yeah." Ethan smiled, but there was a shadow of concern in his dark eyes. "It's just that sometimes I worry because she gets really tired. Yesterday she almost fell asleep standing up while doing the dishes." Emma was silent for a moment, processing the information. At her home, her mom Helen never seemed tired. She was always well-dressed, with manicured nails, attending social events or charity meetings. The idea of a mom who had to work so hard that she became exhausted was something completely outside her reality. "You know what I think?" Emma said, taking Ethan's hand with the seriousness of an adult. "I think your mom and my mom should get to know each other better. My mom is always saying she wants to help people, but sometimes I think she doesn't know how." Ethan tilted his head, curious. "What's your mom like?" "She's beautiful and smells nice, always," Emma laughed. "And she's very affectionate with me. But sometimes I see her looking out the window with a sad face, you know, like she's waiting for something that never comes." "My mom gets sad sometimes too," Ethan admitted, "especially when she thinks I'm not watching. She looks at the bills and sighs, or spends a long time in the shower crying softly." The two were silent, two small observers of the adult life surrounding them, united by a mutual understanding that went beyond their ages. "Ethan," Emma suddenly said, "do you want to come to my house one day? We could do homework together, and your mom could meet mine." The afternoon was advancing when Sarah arrived at the third and final job of the day, cleaning a small law office in Brooklyn. It was her favorite job because the office was small, the lawyers were kind, and she could work at her own pace. More importantly, it finished at 5 in the afternoon, giving her time to pick up Ethan from school and spend some quality hours with him before exhaustion took over. She was organizing the reception desk when her phone rang. The number on the screen made her frown. It was Ethan's school. "Hello, this is Sarah Johnson." "Hi, Sarah. This is Ms. Luciana, Ethan's teacher. It's nothing urgent, so don't worry, but I would like to talk to you about a situation that happened today." Sarah's heart raced. "What happened? Did he get hurt?" No. Actually, it's something positive. One of the moms in the class, Helen Anderson, Emma's mom, asked if she could have your contact. Apparently the kids are planning a get-together to do homework together, and she would like to speak directly with you about the details. Sarah felt a mix of surprise and nervousness. Helen Anderson. She had seen that name on the class parent list, always associated with generous donations to the school and charity events. "Do you have her number?" she asked, looking for a piece of paper to jot it down. "I do. She asked me to tell you that you can call her any time. She understands that you work and will accommodate your schedule." After writing down the number and saying goodbye to the teacher, Sarah stared at the paper in her hands. 3 weeks ago, her biggest fear was that Ethan wouldn't adapt to school. Now, not only had he adapted, but he had made a friendship that was about to connect two completely different worlds. That night, after Ethan fell asleep, Sarah sat on the small sofa in her rented home on the outskirts of New York. The two-room apartment was simple, but always impeccably clean, decorated with second-hand furniture that she had managed to turn into a cozy home with lots of love and creativity. She looked at the number written on the crumpled paper and took a deep breath. What harm could a conversation do? She dialed the number, and after 3 rings, a female voice answered. "Hello? Hi, this is Sarah Johnson, Ethan's mum. Ms. Luciana gave me your number." "Sarah, I'm so glad you called." The voice on the other end sounded genuinely warm. "I'm Helen. Emma's mom. I don't know if you noticed, but our kids have become best friends. I did notice. Ethan can't stop talking about Emma. She smiled, feeling part of the tension dissipate. He said she wants him to come to her house to do homework together? Exactly. Emma is super excited about the idea. I can pick him up from school any day that works for you, and I can drop him back home in the late afternoon. It would be a pleasure to get to know you better too. Sarah hesitated. The difference between their worlds was glaring. Helen probably drove cars that cost more than Sarah earned in 5 years, lived in neighborhoods she only knew from the newspapers, frequented places where a pregnant housekeeper would be looked at strangely. I don't know if it would be a good idea, she finally said. Our lifestyles are quite different. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and when Helen spoke again, her voice carried a sincerity that surprised Sarah. Sarah, can I be honest with you? Emma has never had a friendship like this. She has always been a solitary child, much too mature for her age. Since she met Ethan, she has come home every day with stories to tell, laughing, excited. That is priceless to me. Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears. That was exactly how she felt about Ethan's friendship with Emma. I completely understand, she murmured. Ethan has also changed a lot since he met Emma. So how about we start slow? Emma can come to your house first, if that makes you feel more comfortable. I can drop her off after school and pick her up in the late afternoon. Sarah looked around her small but cozy living room, imagining a girl used to mansions and privileges playing there. But then she thought of the joy in Ethan's eyes every time he talked about Emma, and she made her decision. All right. How about next Thursday? Perfect. And Sarah? Yes? Thank you for giving this chance. I have a feeling this friendship will be special for all of us. After hanging up, Sarah sat in the dark for a long time, one hand resting on her belly where the baby was gently moving. She didn't know it yet, but that call had set in motion events that would transform not only her children's lives, but also her own, in ways she could never imagine. Thursday arrived with a clear, sunny sky, contrasting with the anxiety Sarah felt growing in her chest since she woke up. She had spent the previous night cleaning every corner of her small house, tidying and rearranging the simple furniture, preparing a homemade snack that she hoped would meet the expectations of a child used to luxuries. Ethan had woken up earlier than usual, excited about Emma's visit. He helped his mother organize his toys, few but well cared for, and carefully chose the books he wanted to show his friend. "Mom, do you think Emma will like my plastic dinosaurs?" he asked, holding a green Tyrannosaurus Rex he had received for his last birthday. "I'm sure she will, my love. And if she doesn't like dinosaurs, you can play something else." Sarah adjusted the sofa cushion, for the third time, trying to hide her nervousness. The important thing is that you both have fun together. Around 4 in the afternoon, a black BMW stopped in front of Sarah's simple house. It was a stark contrast to the rest of the street. Economy cars parked, small lower middle-class houses, children playing on the sidewalk with old bicycles. Some neighbors discreetly approached their windows, curious about the luxury vehicle. Helen stepped out of the car, wearing a navy blue midi dress made of fine fabric, low nude heels, and a camel leather handbag. Even trying to dress more. Simply, it was impossible to hide her social background. Her blonde hair was tied back in a low ponytail, and she wore only small pearl earrings and a discreet wedding band. Emma jumped out of the back seat wearing her school uniform, a small backpack on her back and carrying a paper bag that exuded a delicious aroma. "Mom, it's here!" Emma pointed to Sarah's house, her green eyes shining with excitement. "Gabriel's house!" Helen observed the simple but well-kept residence. It was a small house, painted light yellow with white details on the windows, a small garden in front. with some colorful flowers planted in reused pots. There were crochet curtains in the windows and a rocking chair on the small porch. Details that spoke of care and love, even with limited resources. Ethan appeared at the door before they even reached the gate, his smile lighting up his face. Sarah came right behind, drying her hands on a dish towel, visibly nervous. "Hi, Emma." Ethan ran towards his friend. "You came." "Of course I came. I brought some brownies that Mrs. Thompson made." Emma showed the bag, proud. "She said they're special for smart kids." Helen approached the gate, offering a genuine smile to Sarah. Up close, Sarah could see that Helen had a natural and elegant beauty, but there was something in her green eyes that suggested a hidden sadness, a loneliness that makeup and expensive clothes couldn't disguise. "Sarah, I'm Helen. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. The pleasure is mine." Sarah extended her hand, noticing how soft and well cared for Helen's was, but the grip was firm and warm. "Please, come in. The house is simple, but—" "It's cozy," Helen interrupted, genuinely observing the details of the small garden. "These flowers are beautiful." "Did you plant them yourself?" Sarah nodded, surprised by the real interest in Helen's voice. "Yes, they're daisies and petunias. I'm not very skilled, but they insist on growing." "I would love to have that skill. In my house, we have a gardener who takes care of everything. I don't even know what flowers we have." Helen laughed, but there was a note of sadness in her voice. While the mothers chatted, Ethan and Emma had already disappeared. Inside the house, their cheerful voices echoed from the living room. "Would you like to come in for some coffee?" Sarah offered, still hesitant. "I would love to, if it's not too much trouble." Sarah's living room was small but cozy. A two-seater sofa, covered with a colorful handmade blanket, dominated the space, along with a wooden coffee table where Ethan did his homework. On the wall, simple framed photographs showcased moments from the lives of mother and son. Ethan as a baby, his first steps, preschool and school graduations. A low bookshelf held a few books and toys neatly organized. "Ethan, what cool dinosaurs!" Emma was on the floor, examining the small but well-preserved collection. "Is this one a triceratops?" "Yes, and this one is a velociraptor. Want to see how they fight?" Ethan began to stage an elaborate battle, and Emma laughed delightedly. In the small American kitchen connected to the living room, Sarah prepared coffee, while Helen discreetly observed the surroundings. There were no signs of luxury or waste, but each item had its place. Every detail revealed care and love. The mugs were mismatched, probably collected over time, but they were spotless. The sugar bowl was a repurposed tin, but it was covered with colorful fabric and lace. "How many months along are you?" Helen asked, noticing Sarah's belly. 8 months next week." Sarah instinctively placed her hand on her belly. "This pregnancy has been harder than with Ethan. I think it's the age, the exhaustion. You work a lot, I imagine." Sarah hesitated before responding. "I clean in 3 different places. It's necessary." Helen nodded without judgment, but Sarah saw something shift in her eyes. Perhaps admiration, perhaps pity. She wasn't sure which was worse. "That must be very tiring, especially being pregnant." "Sometimes." Sarah served the coffee in 2 uneven but clean cups. "But it's worth it when I see Ethan happy. At his new school, he deserves every opportunity. He's a special boy. Emma can't stop talking about him. She said he knows everything about dinosaurs and helps you with homework." Sarah smiled with pride. "He's always been very responsible. Sometimes I worry if he had to grow up too fast." "Emma is like that too," Helen confessed, sitting on the edge of the sofa. "Very mature for her age. I think kids who spend a lot of time with adults develop that trait." They fell silent for a moment, watching the children play. Ethan was showing Emma how to assemble a 200-piece puzzle he had received from his previous teacher as a reward for good behavior. Does Emma spend a lot of time alone? Sarah asked, genuinely curious. Helen sighed. More than I'd like. My husband works a lot, travels constantly, and I have my social commitments, but sometimes I wonder if they're really important. What do you mean? Charity luncheons, fundraising events, board meetings for organizations. Things that are supposed to make a difference, but sometimes feel very empty. Helen stirred the sugar into her coffee, lost in thought. Yesterday, Emma asked me why I go out so much if I never seem happy when I come home. Sarah looked at Helen with new eyes. Behind the expensive clothes and elegant posture was a woman questioning her own choices, searching for something more meaningful. And what did you say? That sometimes we do things because they're expected of us, not because we want to. Helen took a sip of coffee and made a surprised expression. This coffee is delicious. What brand is it? Sarah blushed. Actually, it's not special coffee. It's from the supermarket, but I add a little cinnamon and brown sugar while brewing. I learned it from my grandmother. It's much better than the coffee we have at home, which costs 3 times as much. Helen genuinely laughed. Could you teach me? Of course. Sarah perked up, happy to have something to offer. It's quite simple, really. As Sarah explained the secret to her coffee, the children had finished the puzzle and were now flipping through a storybook. Ethan, can you read all of this? Emma asked, impressed. Almost everything. My mom helps me with the hard words. Ethan turned the page. My mom is really smart. She can do difficult math in her head and explains everything I ask. My mom is smart too, but she always seems worried about something. Emma looked in the direction of their mothers. I think adults worry too much. That's true. My mom sometimes stays up at night doing calculations in her notebook, and she sighs a lot. Mine stares out her bedroom window. I once asked her what she was looking at, and she said she was thinking about how the world could be better. The 2 women continued talking in the kitchen, discovering that despite their different worlds, they shared similar concerns about motherhood, the future, and purpose. Sarah, can I ask you a personal question? Helen hesitated. Is Ethan's father present? Sarah felt her face harden slightly. No. When he found out about the pregnancy, he said he wasn't ready to be a father. We haven't seen him since. And the baby you're expecting is from the same father. He showed up again a while back, made promises. But when he found out about another pregnancy, he disappeared again. Sarah took a deep breath. It's better this way. Ethan and I manage well on our own. Helen felt a deep admiration for the woman who had built a stable life for her son without support, working tirelessly yet creating a loving environment. You're very brave. I'm not brave. I'm a mother. We do what we have to do. The sound of a key in the lock interrupted them. Ethan ran to the door. Who is it, Ethan? Sarah asked, getting up. I don't know. Someone is trying to open our door. Sarah frowned and went to the door, looking through the peephole. On the other side was a man in his 30s. Mark, with messy dark hair, stubble, wearing a worn-out t-shirt and ripped jeans, carried a dirty backpack on his back. Sarah! Marina opened the door, just a crack, keeping the security chain in place. What are you doing here? Hey, Mari, can I come in? We need to talk. It's not a good time. I have company. Helen approached discreetly, sensing the tension in Marina's voice. Emma, feeling the change in atmosphere, got up from the floor and moved closer to Ethan, who had instinctively positioned himself between the door and his mother. Mari, please. I heard you're pregnant again. It's mine, isn't it? Marina clenched her fists. Now you want to know. After disappearing for 2 years? I was trying to find myself, but I'm different now. I want to take responsibility. Your responsibilities? Marina's voice rose an octave. Ethan has been your responsibility for 7 years, and the baby I'm expecting is your responsibility for 8 months. Where were you when we needed you? Helen watched the scene with a mix of concern and admiration for Marina's firmness. Emma moved closer to her, instinctively seeking protection. "Mom, can we go?" Emma whispered. "In a minute, sweetheart," Helen replied softly. But she didn't move. Something told her that Marina might need support. "Marina, I've changed. I've been clean for 3 months. I got a job." "3 months?" Marina laughed bitterly. "Ethan is 7 years old, Mark. 3 months don't erase 7 years of absence." "But what about the baby? I can't let my child grow up without a father like Ethan." "Ethan didn't grow up without a father. He grew up with the mother who chose to stay, and this baby will grow up the same way." Mark tried to push the door, but Marina held it firmly. "Mari, don't be like this. I have rights." "You have rights when you take on duties," interrupted a firm voice behind Marina. Everyone turned to see Helen approaching the door, her posture upright and voice filled with authority from years of dealing with men in positions of power. "And who are you?" Mark looked Helen up and down, clearly intimidated by her elegant and confident presence. "I'm a friend of Marina's, and I suggest you respect her decision and leave." "That's none of your business, madam. Everything that involves the well-being of children is my business." Helen positioned herself beside Marina, a silent show of support. "And from what I can see, you're disturbing. A pregnant mother and frightening children." Ethan moved even closer to Marina, holding onto the hem of her shirt. Emma did the same with Helen. Mark looked at the small group united at the door, 2 mothers protecting their children, 2 women from different worlds who had instinctively allied against a common threat. "This isn't over, Marina," he finally said, stepping back. "Yes, it is," Marina replied firmly. "It ended a long time ago." After Mark stepped away, Marina closed the door and leaned against it, trembling slightly. Helen gently touched her shoulder. "Are you okay?" Marina nodded, but there were tears in her eyes. "Thank you. You didn't have to." "Of course I did. No one should face this alone." Ethan hugged his mother's legs. "Mom, who was that man?" Marina looked at her son, then at Helen and Emma, who were watching with concern. It was a moment of truth she couldn't avoid. "He was your biological father, Ethan. But you don't need to worry about that. He's not part of our lives." Emma released Helen and went to Ethan, taking his hand. "It's okay not to have a dad. What's important is having people who truly love you." Helen observed her daughter's precocious wisdom and felt her heart warm. That afternoon had revealed more about courage, family, and true love than years of empty social events. As the afternoon came to an end, and it was time for Helen and Emma to leave, something fundamental had changed between the 2 families. They were no longer just the mothers of best friends. They had become allies, women who would support each other. "Marina," Helen said before leaving, "if you ever need anything at all, call me. It's not charity, it's friendship." Marina nodded, knowing that for the first time in a long time, she wasn't truly alone. 2 weeks passed since the incident with Mark, and Marina noticed a subtle but significant change in her daily routine. Helen had started picking up Ethan from school on Tuesdays and Thursdays, taking him to play with Emma at her house, and always brought him back with a prepared snack and homework done. It was an arrangement that, according to Helen, benefited both Emma and Ethan, but Marina knew it was primarily a disguised gesture of care. That Tuesday morning, Marina was at her second job of the day, cleaning the offices of Dr. Smith, when she felt a strong contraction that made her lean against the reception desk. She took a deep breath, counting mentally. There were only 3 weeks left until the delivery, and her body was already showing clear signs that the baby was preparing to enter the world. "Are you okay?" asked the receptionist, Mrs. Johnson. a woman in her 40s who always treated Marina with genuine kindness. "Just a contraction. It's still too early." Marina forced a smile, but the worry was evident in her voice. "Marina, you need to slow down. Working so close to your due date can be dangerous for you and the baby." Marina knew Carmen was right, but the financial reality didn't allow for luxuries like early leave. Every day of work lost meant less money for the baby's supplies and for the first months when she wouldn't be able to work. Meanwhile, at the Anderson mansion in Westchester, Helen watched Ethan and Emma playing in the garden through the panoramic window of her living room. The house was impressive: 3 stories, a pool, landscaped gardens, furniture of Italian design, but at that moment what caught the most attention was the sound of children's laughter echoing through the normally quiet hallways. Ethan was fascinated by the house. He had never seen anything like it: rooms larger than his entire home, bathrooms with whirlpool tubs, a TV room with a screen the size of a wall. But what impressed him the most wasn't the luxury, but the sadness that seemed to inhabit those vast spaces. "Emma, where is your dad?" Ethan asked as they explored the second floor. "Working. He's always working." Emma shrugged, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Sometimes he travels for weeks. My mum stays alone, watching TV or reading books." "Don't you miss him?" Emma stopped walking and looked out the hallway window, which overlooked the garden, where Helen was walking alone among the flowers, her cell phone glued to her ear in yet another call related to volunteer work. "I think so, but it's hard to miss someone you hardly see even when they're home." Her voice had a disturbing maturity for a 7-year-old. "Ethan, do you miss your dad?" Ethan thought for a moment. "Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to have a dad, but I don't miss him because I never really had one. It's different to miss someone you know." They reached Emma's room, a true paradise for any child, with a pink canopy bed, shelves full of books, toys organized by category, and a complete study corner with its own computer. But Ethan noticed that despite all the expensive toys, Emma picked up a simple handmade doll. "Who made this doll?" Ethan asked, gently touching the worn fabric. "My maternal grandmother before she passed away. It's the only thing I have of hers." Emma hugged the doll. "My mom doesn't talk much about her family. I think it hurts." Downstairs, Helen had finished her call and was preparing a snack for the children in the gourmet kitchen. It was a task that would normally fall to the cook, Mrs. Thompson, but Helen had realized she enjoyed these simple moments of maternal care. She cut fresh fruits and prepared sandwiches, thinking about how Sarah did this every day with much less, but with equal love. The phone rang, and Helen answered, expecting it to be another of the many calls related to her social commitments. Instead, she heard the worried voice of the school secretary. "Mrs. Anderson, this is the office of St. Teresa Academy. We are trying to contact Gabriel's mother, but she isn't answering her cell. Since you are on the emergency contact list..." Helen's heart raced. "What happened to Gabriel?" "Nothing serious, but he's feeling unwell. Stomachache and nausea. We would like someone to come pick him up." Helen looked at the clock. Sarah should be at work, probably unable to leave to pick up Gabriel. "I'll pick him up immediately. Can you tell him Aunt Helen is on her way?" 20 minutes later, Helen was in the school infirmary, watching Gabriel, pale and curled up on the small cot. Emma had insisted on coming with her, worried about her friend. "Gabriel, how are you feeling?" Helen knelt down to be at his level, touching his forehead to check his temperature. "Better now that you're here," Gabriel murmured. "Sorry for the trouble, Aunt Helen." "What trouble, Gabriel? Family takes care of family." The words came out naturally, and Helen realized she truly felt that way. Somehow, in the past few weeks, Gabriel had become part of her life. "Did they manage to reach my mum?" "We are still trying, But don't worry, you're coming home with us and we'll stay with you until she arrives, okay? On the way home, Gabriel fell asleep in the back seat of the car, and Emma held his hand the entire way. Helen watched in the rearview mirror, moved by the genuine care between the two children. Arriving home, Helen settled Gabriel in the guest room on the first floor, a larger and more luxurious room than anywhere he had ever slept, and called Sarah again. This time she answered, "Sarah, this is Helen. Gabriel got sick at school and I brought him home. He's better, now resting." On the other end of the line, Helen heard a tense silence. "Sarah, are you there?" "Sorry, Helen. Thank you so much for taking care of him. I was at work and—" Sarah's voice trembled. "You don't need to apologize. Gabriel is well taken care of. Actually, I'd like to talk to you about something. When you can come pick him up, how about we stay for tea?" Sarah arrived at the Andersons' house at 6 in the evening after taking 2 buses and still wearing her cleaning company uniform. The contrast between her appearance and the imposing electronic gate of the mansion made her hesitate for a moment before ringing the bell. A uniformed maid greeted her at the door and led her to the living room, where Helen awaited with a tray of tea and homemade cookies. Gabriel and Emma were in the garden, visible through the glass doors, playing tag among the trees. "Sarah, please have a seat." Helen gestured to one of the light leather armchairs. "How are you? You look tired." Sarah sat on the edge of the armchair, clearly uncomfortable with all the elegance around her. "I'm fine, and thank you for taking care of Gabriel. I don't know what I would have done if—" "Sarah," Helen gently interrupted her, "may I ask a direct question? When was the last time you went to the doctor?" The question caught Sarah off guard. "I went last month. Everything is fine with the baby." "I'm not talking about the baby. I'm talking about you. When was the last time someone took care of you?" Sarah felt tears filled her eyes. No one had asked her that question in years. I take care of myself." "Sarah, you're working 12 hours a day, 8 months pregnant. That's not taking care of yourself. That's destroying yourself." Helen leaned forward, her voice heavy with genuine concern. "What if something happens to you? What will happen to Ethan and the baby?" "I have no choice." The words came out louder than Sarah intended. "Do you think I work like this because I want to? Do you think it's easy to clean offices on my knees with an 8-month belly?" Helen fell silent, allowing Sarah to vent. "I'm sorry," Sarah murmured, wiping her eyes. "I shouldn't have shouted. You've only been helping me, and I—" "Don't apologize. You have every right to be frustrated." Helen stood up and walked to the window, watching the children. "Sarah, can I make a proposal?" Sarah watched her cautiously. "I need someone to help me with some things around the house. Organizing papers, correspondence, some administrative tasks. It would be a lighter job, with flexible hours, and you could bring Ethan here after school. What do you think?" Sarah felt a mix of relief and wounded pride. "Helen, I know you're trying to help me, but I don't want charity. It's not charity. It's a real need." Helen returned to her chair. "Have you noticed how big and empty this house is? How much happier Emma has been since Ethan started coming here? You would be doing me a favor, not the other way around." Sarah studied Helen for a long moment, trying to detect any sign of condescension or pity. Instead, she saw sincerity and a vulnerability that mirrored her own. "And what about my other jobs? You could gradually reduce them as you feel more secure. You don't have to make a decision right now." At that moment, Ethan appeared in the doorway, flushed and smiling after playing with Emma. "Mom, you're here. Aunt Helen made a delicious tea for me and Emma showed me her library. It has more books than the school library." Sarah watched her son, lively and healthy, then looked at Helen, who regarded Ethan with genuine maternal affection. "Can I think about your proposal?" "Of course. And Sarah?" Yes? Regardless of your decision about the job, Ethan will always be welcome here. Emma considers him the brother she never had. As Sarah and Ethan walked to the bus stop that night, Sarah felt she was at a crossroads. On one hand, her independence and pride made her resist help. On the other, the reality of her situation, 8 months pregnant, exhausted, alone, made Helen's proposal almost irresistible. "Mom," Ethan said, breaking her thoughts, "Aunt Helen is just like you." "What do you mean, my love?" "She takes care of everyone, but forgets to take care of herself." Sarah looked at her son, surprised once again by his insight. Maybe accepting help wasn't a sign of weakness, but of wisdom. Perhaps 2 women taking care of each other was better than each trying to be strong alone. That night, upon arriving home, Sarah sat at the little table in the living room, where she always did the household accounts, and for the first time in months she didn't feel the crushing weight of financial responsibility, not because her problems had vanished, but because finally she wasn't facing everything alone. Sarah's cell phone alarm went off at 5 in the morning on a rainy Friday in May, as always. But this time, when she tried to get out of bed, a sharp pain in her lower back made her stagger and lean against the wall. The heavy 8.5-month belly seemed to have grown even more overnight, and her legs were swollen to the point that she could barely put on her slippers. Ethan appeared at the bedroom door, already dressed in his school uniform, carrying a cup of coffee he had made himself. "Mum, are you okay? I heard you groaning." Sarah forced a smile, accepting the coffee with trembling hands. "I'm fine, my love. Just a little tired." But she wasn't fine, and they both knew it. In the past few weeks, since Helen had made her job offer, Sarah had continued to juggle 3 jobs while thinking about the offer. The truth was that her pride prevented her from accepting what she considered disguised charity, even when her body screamed for rest. "Mom, why don't you call Aunt Helen? She said you could work for her whenever you wanted." Sarah sat heavily on the edge of the bed. "Ethan, do you like going to Emma's house?" "I like it a lot. Why? Don't you feel diminished when you're there, with all those expensive things we don't have?" Ethan sat beside his mother, his expression serious for a 7-year-old. "Mum, there are a lot of beautiful things there, it's true, but do you know what the problem is?" "What?" "There's no real love. Emma's dad is hardly ever home, and when he is, he stays in the office working on the computer. Aunt Helen is alone watching TV until late because there's no one to talk to. The house is big and beautiful, but it's sad." Sarah felt her heart tighten at her son's insightful observation. "Here it's different," Ethan continued. "It's small, but we talk, we laugh. You tell me stories before bed. Aunt Helen once said our house has something hers doesn't: soul." The tears Sarah had been holding back for weeks finally began to fall. "You're very wise, you know that." "I learned from you," Ethan hugged his mother. "Mom, Aunt Helen needs us as much as we need her. You're not accepting charity. You're making a trade." 2 hours later, Sarah was at her first job, cleaning the restrooms of the accounting firm, when she felt the first real contraction. It was different from the practice contractions she had been feeling for weeks. Sarah was in intense, painful labor, accompanied by a strange sensation in her pelvic region. Mrs. Johnson found her leaning against the bathroom sink, breathing heavily. "Sarah, what's happening?" I think the baby is coming. Oh my God, we need to get to the hospital now." "I can't. I need to finish here, then pick up Ethan from school, and I still have work this afternoon." Celia looked at Sarah as if she had lost her mind. "Girl, you don't understand. This baby is coming today, whether you like it or not." While Celia called for an ambulance, Sarah, amidst the growing contractions, thought of one person to call. Her hands trembled as she dialed Helen's number. "Hello, Sarah. Are you okay?" "Helen," Sarah's voice came. out-choked with pain. I think I'm going into labor. I'm heading to New York General Hospital. Ethan is at school and... Sarah, breathe. I'll pick up Ethan now and meet you at the hospital. Which hospital? New York General, in Midtown. But Helen, you don't have to... Of course I do. Now stop being stubborn and focus on having that baby safely. Helen hung up and immediately cancelled all her appointments for the day. She quickly applied lipstick, grabbed her bag, and headed straight to St. Teresa Academy. She found Ethan and Emma at recess and explained the situation, with the calm necessary to avoid scaring them. Ethan, your little brother decided today is his birthday. Your mom is at the hospital, and we're going to meet her there. Ethan's eyes widened. The baby is coming already, but we haven't bought the crib yet. Don't worry about that now. The important thing is that your mom and the baby are okay. Emma held Ethan's hand. Can I come too? I promise I'll help. Helen looked at her daughter and saw the determination in her green eyes. Of course you can. We'll all take care of Ethan and Sarah. At the hospital, Sarah was in the prep room, wearing a hospital gown and connected to monitors tracking the baby's heartbeat. The contractions were coming every 5 minutes, and she felt completely alone and scared, even surrounded by the medical team. Dr. Smith, the on-call obstetrician, reviewed her exams. Sarah, everything is going well, but the baby is in a hurry. You're already 4 centimeters dilated. But it's too early. There are still 2 weeks to go. Babies have their own schedules. The doctor smiled. He's well positioned and has a good heartbeat. We'll wait for the natural progression of labor. When Helen arrived with the kids, she found Sarah gripping the bed rails, breathing heavily during a contraction. Sarah? Helen rushed to her, taking her hand. How are you? Scared, Sarah admitted, her defenses finally lowered by the vulnerability of the moment. What if something goes wrong? What if I can't take care of 2 kids alone? Nothing is going to go wrong, Helen said firmly, and you're not alone. Ethan approached the bed shyly. Mom, can I touch your belly to talk to the baby? Sarah smiled through her tears and guided her son's small hand to her belly. You can, sweetheart. Ethan leaned in and whispered, Hi, little brother. I'm Ethan, your big brother. We've been waiting for you for a long time, but you don't have to rush. Mommy's taking good care of you. As if he were listening, the baby kicked hard, making everyone laugh. I think he heard you, Emma said, amazed. Hours passed slowly. Helen stayed by Sarah's side throughout the process, holding her hand during contractions, wiping her sweaty face, offering ice when she was thirsty. Ethan and Emma took turns staying in the room and playing in the pediatric waiting area. Around 4 in the afternoon, Dr. Smith examined Sarah again. It's time, you're fully dilated. Sarah panicked. Helen, I can't do this. What if something goes wrong? Helen held Sarah's face in her hands. Look at me. You are the bravest woman I know. You raised Ethan alone, worked 3 jobs while pregnant, faced an irresponsible ex-boyfriend, built a life from nothing. If anyone can do this, it's you. Will you stay with me? I'm not going anywhere. Labor intensified quickly. Sarah clung to Helen's hand as if it were an anchor, and Helen, who had had Emma through a scheduled cesarean in a luxury suite, was experiencing the raw, natural intensity of childbirth for the first time. I can see the head, Dr. Smith announced. One more strong contraction, Sarah. With one last effort that seemed to drain all her energy, Sarah brought her second child into the world. The strong, healthy cry of the baby echoed through the room, and Sarah collapsed onto the bed, exhausted but radiant. It's a boy, the doctor said, placing the baby on Sarah's chest. Perfect and healthy. Sarah looked at her newborn son, with dark hair like hers and a serious expression that already resembled Ethan. "Hi, Liam," she whispered, touching his tiny fingers. "Welcome to our family." Helen watched the scene with tears in her eyes, touched by the beauty of that intimate moment. When Sarah looked at her, they both smiled. "Thank you for staying with me," Sarah said. "I don't know what I would have done alone." "You will never be alone again," Helen replied, gently touching baby Liam's head. "This boy will have the whole family he deserves." Ethan and Emma were allowed into the room to meet the new family member. Ethan approached reverently, as if he were in a sacred place. "He's so small," Ethan whispered, gently touching Liam's tiny hand. "Hi, Liam. I'm your big brother. I promise to take care of you forever." Emma watched, fascinated. "He looks like you, Ethan." "That's because we're real brothers," Ethan replied proudly. Helen observed the scene, two children contemplating a newborn, a tired but happy mother. A moment of pure happiness in a simple public hospital room. And she realized she was witnessing something far more valuable than all the luxurious social events she attended. Dr. Smith returned with the paperwork. "Sarah, everything went perfectly. You and the baby can be discharged tomorrow morning if all continues to go well." "Doctor," Helen addressed the physician, "what are the necessary postpartum care instructions?" "The usual care. At least a week of rest, proper nutrition, medical follow-up, and of course help with the newborn, because the first months are challenging." After the doctor left, Helen turned to Sarah. "You're coming to my house when you leave the hospital." "Helen, I can't." "This isn't a request, Sarah. It's a necessity. You just had a baby. Ethan needs stability, and I need you both as much as you need me." Helen sat on the edge of the bed. "Stop fighting alone. Accept help. Accept that sometimes life offers us gifts we didn't ask for, but that we need." Sarah looked at Liam sleeping in her arms, then at Ethan holding Emma's hand, then at Helen, a woman who had entered her life as the mother of a classmate and had become so much more than that. "All right," she finally said, "but only until I recover." Helen smiled, knowing this would be the first of many changes in all their lives. "Only until you recover," she agreed, though both knew this temporary arrangement had the potential to become something much more permanent and meaningful. That night, while Sarah slept exhausted and Liam rested in the hospital crib, Helen remained seated in the visitor's chair, watching them. For the first time in years, she felt that her life had real purpose, that she was making a concrete difference in the lives of people who mattered. Her phone vibrated with a message from Robert, asking where she was. She glanced at the screen for a moment and then turned off the device. There were more important things to focus on now. The Anderson mansion had never housed a newborn. When Helen arrived home the next morning with Sarah, Ethan, and little Liam, the house that had always seemed silent and empty suddenly gained a completely different energy. The baby's cries echoed through the marble hallways, and the sound of Ethan's footsteps running after Emma created a domestic symphony the house hadn't known in years. Helen had prepared one of the guest rooms on the ground floor for Sarah and Liam, complete with a borrowed crib from a friend, a changing table, and all the baby items she had impulsively bought in the last 24 hours. It was a spacious room overlooking the garden, with an ensuite bathroom and a nursing chair positioned near the window. "Helen, this is too much," Sarah protested, observing the perfectly organized room. "You bought an entire baby store." "Don't exaggerate," Helen smiled, adjusting Liam in the new crib. "Besides, it's been a while since I had an excuse to buy cute things." Ethan was exploring the house with wide eyes. After sleeping in hospital bunk beds, waking up in a room that looked like it came out of a magazine was surreal. Emma proudly guided him, showing each room as if she were a personal tour guide. "And this is the room where you can sleep," Emma said, opening the door to another guest room down the hall. "It's really close to your mum's room in case you need her at night." The room was larger than the living room of his old house. It had a twin bed with a navy blue comforter, a wooden desk, empty shelves waiting to be filled with his books, and a window overlooking the pool. "Emma, this is amazing," Ethan murmured. "But I don't know if I should stay. Here, it's too much." "Ethan," Emma sat on the edge of the bed. "Remember when you told me your house was small but had soul?" Ethan nodded. "Now our house will have soul too." As the children settled in, Sarah was in the kitchen with Helen, trying to get used to the feeling of not having to do everything alone. Helen had insisted on preparing lunch, something she hadn't done in years, as she usually relied on the cook. "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" Sarah asked, watching Helen struggle with the pressure cooker. "More or less," Helen admitted with a laugh. "Mrs. Thompson, our cook, has Sundays off. I thought it would be a good opportunity for me to remember how to cook." Sarah stepped closer and gently took over. "Let me help you. It's the least I can do." Working side by side in the kitchen, the two women found a comfortable rhythm. Sarah taught simple techniques she had learned out of necessity, while Helen provided quality ingredients that Sarah rarely could afford. "Sarah," Helen said while chopping tomatoes, "can I ask you something about the boy's father?" Sarah tensed but continued stirring the sauté. "You can ask. Do you still love him?" The question caught Sarah off guard. She stopped stirring the pot and looked out the window, where Ethan and Emma were playing on the lawn. "I don't think I ever really loved him," she finally said. "I was young, lonely, and he made me feel special for a while. But real love? I don't know if I knew what that meant back then." "And do you know now?" Sarah looked at Liam sleeping in the stroller next to the counter, then at Ethan laughing in the garden. "Now I know that love is what I feel for these boys. It's waking up in the middle of the night worried. It's working to the limit to give them opportunities. It's feeling my heart might burst with pride when Ethan reads a whole sentence." Helen nodded, fully understanding. "That's how I feel about Emma. And about Robert. Do you love him?" The question was asked with genuine curiosity, without judgment. Helen paused what she was doing, considering. "Answer. I think I loved him. Or I thought I loved him. We met in college. He was ambitious, charming, made me feel important." Helen sighed. "But somewhere along the way, we stopped really seeing each other. Now we're like polite roommates sharing a daughter." "Does that hurt you?" "It did. Now it's more like a constant sadness, you know. Like when you lose something but you can't quite remember what it was." The sound of a baby crying interrupted the conversation. Sarah dried her hands and went to get Liam, who had woken up to nurse. Helen watched the ease with which Sarah adjusted the baby and began breastfeeding, an ancient dance between mother and child. "Can I hold him later?" Helen asked shyly. "Of course. By the way, if you want to help me with him sometimes, I would be very grateful, especially at night when Ethan needs to sleep for school." It was as if a missing piece had finally found its place. Helen, who had spent years feeling useless despite all her education and resources, suddenly had a clear and immediate purpose. The first night in the mansion was a revelation for everyone. Ethan, used to sharing a small room with his mother, initially felt lost in the spacious room. Around midnight he got up and walked down the hall to his mother's room, finding the door ajar. Sarah was sitting in the armchair nursing Liam, but she looked exhausted. "Mom, are you okay?" "I'm fine, dear." Liam was hungry. "Go back to sleep." "Can I stay for a bit? I can't sleep." Sarah made space on the wide armchair, and Ethan curled up next to her. It was an intimate and familiar moment that calmed them amidst so much newness. "Ethan, are you happy here?" "I am, but it's also strange." "What do you mean?" "It's very quiet. At home, we could hear the neighbors, cars passing by, dogs barking. Here it's Very quiet, as if she had heard him, Helen appeared in the doorway wearing a pink silk robe. "Sorry, I heard voices. Is everything okay?" "Liam was hungry," Sarah explained, "and Ethan can't sleep." "The house is strange when you're not used to it," Helen agreed, stepping into the room. "When I was little and visited my grandma, who had a big house like this, I also couldn't sleep." "What did you do?" Ethan asked curiously. "My grandma would make hot chocolate and tell stories until I fell asleep." Ethan looked hopefully at Sarah, who chuckled softly. "I think we can do that. Helen, do you know how to make hot chocolate?" "Actually, yes. My grandma taught me before she passed away. I haven't made it since, but I think I still remember." 20 minutes later, the four of them were in the kitchen, Sarah holding Liam, Ethan sitting on the kitchen island counter, and Helen stirring hot milk in a pot, adding cocoa powder and a pinch of cinnamon, just like her Italian grandma had taught her decades ago. "All set," Helen announced, serving the hot chocolate in colourful mugs. "Grandma Julia's secret recipe." Ethan took a sip, and his eyes widened. "It's delicious. It's different from the hot chocolate we make at home. That's because this one has love from an Italian grandma," Helen smiled. They sat at the kitchen table, a domestic scene none of the four had experienced before, a makeshift family united by circumstances but starting to connect by choice. "Helen," Sarah said, watching how her friend interacted naturally with Ethan, "can I ask why you never had more children?" Helen fell silent for a moment, stirring the chocolate in her mug. "We tried for years after Emma. I had 3 miscarriages. After that, Robert said maybe it was a sign for us to focus on other things. Did you want more children?" "Desperately. I always dreamed of a house full of laughter, chaos, life." Helen looked around the kitchen, where Ethan was drawing on the steam of the hot mug. "Ironically, right? I have this huge house and always wanted to fill it with family." Ethan looked at Helen with his characteristic seriousness. "Aunt Helen, you can share our family. Now we have 2 boys and you have a girl. It's balanced." The simplicity of Ethan's proposal made Helen smile through her tears. "Would you really? Let me?" "Of course. Family isn't about blood. It's about who takes care of you." Sarah watched the interaction between her son and Helen, seeing how naturally they had created a connection. For the first time in years, she didn't feel overwhelmed by the total responsibility of raising her children. When they finally returned to their rooms, it was almost 2 in the morning. Ethan fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from the day's excitement. Sarah managed to settle Liam in the crib and finally lay down on the comfortable bed. Helen paused at the door before heading to her room. "Sarah, thank you." "Why? You're the one helping me." "For letting me be a part of this. It's been a long time since I felt needed." "Helen, you will always be needed here. You saved us when we needed it most." As the house finally quieted down for the night, each in their new space, there was a palpable sense that something fundamental had changed. They were no longer 2 separate families helping each other. They were becoming something new, something none of them had planned, but that everyone recognized as right. In the master bedroom, Robert returned home from another business trip, finding the house strangely different. There were toys in the yard, sounds he didn't recognize, a baby stroller in the entryway. He climbed the stairs without waking anyone, but stood at the window of his office, observing the unusual activity in his house, trying to understand what exactly had changed in his absence. Robert Anderson came down for coffee the following Monday morning, still trying to process the changes he had found in his home. At 48, he was a man accustomed to total control of his environment. His morning routine always included black coffee, the financial newspaper, and absolute silence before heading to the office. Instead, Sarah found her kitchen transformed into a scene of family chaos. Helen was preparing baby bottles while holding Liam, who was crying intermittently. Ethan and Emma were having breakfast at the kitchen island, animatedly discussing a school project. Sarah was organizing the diaper bag while eating a piece of toast on her feet, clearly preparing to leave. "Good morning," said Robert, his voice cutting through the children's chatter. Everyone turned. Ethan and Emma instantly fell silent, Ethan instinctively hiding behind Emma. Sarah paused what she was doing, visibly uncomfortable with the presence of the homeowner. "Robert, did you arrive last night?" Helen asked, trying to keep her tone casual. "These are Sarah and Ethan, and this little one is Liam." Robert observed the scene with critical eyes, his wife caring for someone else's baby, his daughter sharing breakfast with a child from a completely different social class, a stranger using his kitchen as if it were her own home. "Helen, can we talk? Privately?" The tone was polite but firm, laden with corporate authority that left no room for negotiation. Helen handed Liam to Sarah and followed her husband to his office on the second floor. Robert's office was a perfect reflection of his personality. Dark leather furniture, shelves filled with business books, diplomas and framed awards on the walls, a commanding desk strategically positioned facing the door. It was an environment designed to intimidate, and Robert knew it. "Helen, what exactly is going on here?" "Sarah just had a baby and needed help. They are friends of Emma and—" "Friends?" Robert interrupted, his voice rising a notch. "Helen, this is our home, not a shelter for needy families. You can't just bring strangers to live here without consulting me." Helen felt anger rising. Within her, an emotion she had suppressed for years in the name of marital harmony. Strangers? "Robert, you've been away for 2 weeks. You don't even know the name of your own daughter's best friend." "That's not the point. The point is that your daughter was feeling lonely and sad, and now she's happy. The point is that I found a purpose that isn't just about spending money on empty charity events." Robert stood up from his chair, assuming his corporate confrontation posture. "Helen, be realistic. You don't know these people. How do you know they aren't taking advantage of your goodwill? And a single woman with 2 children. What kind of example does that set for Emma?" The last sentence was like a slap in the face to Helen. "What kind of example?" "Robert, Sarah works 3 jobs to support her children on her own. She is more dedicated and courageous than anyone in our social circle. And where is the father of those children? Why isn't he taking care of his own family?" "Because some men abandon their responsibilities when they become inconvenient," Helen replied, looking directly into her husband's eyes. The implication did not go unnoticed by Robert. They stared at each other for a long moment, years of unexpressed resentment hanging in the air between them. "Are you insinuating something, Helen?" "I'm stating that you question the absence of Liam's father when you yourself have been absent from your own daughter's life for years." Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Sarah was finishing up preparing things to take Ethan to school. The voices from upstairs were audible, and she felt every muscle in her body tense with anxiety. "Aunt Sarah," Emma said softly, "is my dad angry?" Sarah crouched down to be at a girl's level. Sometimes adults need to talk about important things, and those conversations can sound angry even when they're not. Ethan approached. "Mum, are we going to have to leave?" The innocent question cut through Sarah's heart. In the last 48 hours, Ethan had experienced a stability and comfort he had never had before. The thought of tearing that away from him again was painful. "I don't know, my love, but if we have to go, we'll be okay. We always are." Emma took Ethan's hand. "I'm not going to let you guys leave. I'm going to talk to my dad." "Emma, no," Sarah gently interrupted. "This isn't your problem to solve." "But it is. Ethan is my best friend, and you and Aunt Helen are happy together. Even Liam laughs more here than at the hospital." As if he had heard his name, Liam began to cry in Sarah's arms. It was time for his feeding, but she hesitated to settle in comfortably to nurse while listening to the discussion upstairs. The conversation in the office had intensified. "Helen, you're being naive. People from different social classes have different values, different expectations. Do you think you can maintain this fantasy of a happy family indefinitely?" "Fantasy?" Helen laughed bitterly. "Robert, in the last 2 days, I have felt more like a mother, more useful, more alive than in the last 5 years. If this is a fantasy, then what was our previous life? A polite nightmare. It was a stable, predictable life. It was an empty life," Helen finally exploded. "You travel constantly. Emma spends more time with the nanny than with us. I spend my days pretending that superficial social events fulfill me, and you want me to go back to that because it's appropriate?" Robert fell silent, clearly not expecting such an outburst from his normally composed wife. "Sarah and the boys have brought life into this house," Helen continued, her voice trembling with emotion. "Emma is happy for the first time in years. I have purpose, and you want me to throw all of that away because it doesn't fit your image of how we should live? Helen, be practical. What will others think?" "Others?" Helen stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the garden, where there were still toys scattered from the previous day's play. "Robert, when was the last time you did you care about what I think? When was the last time you asked if I was happy?" Robert was taken aback by the direct question. "I assume you are happy. You have everything a woman could want. Everything except a present husband and a united family." The silence that followed was deafening. Years of unspoken issues, unmet needs, and lost connectivity finally came to the surface. "What are you saying, Helen?" "I'm saying that Sarah and the boys are staying. If you can't accept that, maybe it's time to rethink other things too." The implied threat hung in the air. Robert, used to negotiating and controlling, suddenly found himself in unfamiliar territory where his wife was not yielding to his expectations. At that moment, gentle knocks on the door interrupted the tension. Emma entered the office without waiting for permission, her small, determined figure contrasting with the imposing environment. "Dad, can I talk to you?" Robert looked at his daughter, noticing for the first time in a long time how much she had grown, how her green eyes carried a seriousness that a 7-year-old shouldn't have. "Of course, Emma. What is it?" "Dad, you know I've always wanted a brother." Robert nodded, unsure of where the conversation was heading. "Now I have 2. Ethan is like the brother I always wanted, and Liam is like a baby in the family. And you know what else?" "What, sweetheart?" "Mom is happy. She laughs now, plays with me, teaches things to Ethan. Before you weren't here, and she was sad watching TV. Now, even when you're not here, she's happy." Emma's innocent yet insightful observation hit Robert unexpectedly. He looked at Helen, seeing her through their daughter's eyes, a woman who had found joy and purpose in caring for an improvised family. "Emma," Robert said, kneeling to be at his daughter's level, "what do you think I should do?" "I think you should get to know Ethan and Sarah better. They are really nice people, and if you got to know them, you would like them too." Robert looked at Helen over Emma's head. His wife was watching the interaction with a mix of hope and challenge in her eyes. "All right," Robert finally said. "How about I stay for breakfast and get to know our guests better?" Emma beamed and ran downstairs shouting, "Ethan, my dad wants to meet you." Helen and Robert were alone in the office again, but the atmosphere had changed. The tension was still present, but there was something more, a possibility of change, of growth, of redefining what it meant to be a family. "Helen," Robert said, his voice softer, "I don't completely understand what's happening, but I can see that it's important to you, and to Emma. It's important to me." Helen confirmed. More important than you realize. Then help me understand. Give me a chance to get to know these people who have changed our home so much. It was a small but significant first step. When they descended to the kitchen, they found Ethan helping Sarah prepare more toast, while Emma held Liam with extreme care, humming a children's song. It was a scene of simple domestic life, but filled with love and mutual care. Robert, watching from the outside, began to understand what had drawn Helen so strongly to this new family dynamic. Perhaps, he thought, it was time to learn something new about what really mattered in life. The breakfast that followed was one of the most uncomfortable yet revealing experiences of Robert Anderson's life. Accustomed to silent meals where he checked emails while eating, he found himself at a table full of cross-conversations, children's laughter, and the constant sound of Liam making little baby noises in Sarah's lap. Ethan, initially shy in the presence of Emma's father, gradually opened up as Robert showed genuine interest in his responses. What began as polite questions transformed into real curiosity. "Ethan, Emma told me you're really good at math," Robert said, cutting his toast with businesslike precision. "I like numbers," Ethan replied, glancing quickly at Sarah before continuing. "My mom teaches me how to do the household budget. She says it's important to understand money." Robert stopped chewing, surprised. "What kind of calculations do you know how to do?" Ethan perked up, forgetting his shyness. "I can add up how much we spend at the grocery store, calculate what's left after paying the bills, and I even know how to use proportions to see if it's better to buy the large or small product." Sarah smiled proudly. "Ethan has always had a knack for numbers. I used to do accounting before." "You did accounting?" Robert turned to her with renewed interest. "I was studying accounting," Sarah confirmed, adjusting Liam's position. "I dropped out when I got pregnant with Ethan. I needed to work to support myself, and I couldn't balance studying, working, and pregnancy." "And do you plan to go back to studying?" Sarah hesitated. It was a question she had avoided asking herself for years. Maybe one day, when things are more stable. Robert looked at Sarah with new eyes. She was not just a needy woman that his wife had taken in out of pity. She was an intelligent woman who had made sacrifices out of necessity, not from a lack of ambition. "You know," Robert said thoughtfully, "my company is always looking for people with a good head for numbers, especially people who understand the reality of managing limited resources." Helen watched her husband with surprise. She recognized that tone. It was the same one he used when identifying potential talents for his businesses. "Robert," Helen discreetly warned him, fearing he was being condescending. "No, Helen, I'm serious." Robert turned fully to Sarah. "The practical experience you have managing a household budget with limited resources is exactly the kind of perspective that many companies lack. People who have never faced financial difficulties don't understand the importance of every penny." Sarah felt a mix of hope and distrust. "Mr. Robert, I know you are being kind, but I don't have a degree." "Degrees can be obtained," Robert interrupted. "Practical intelligence and work ethic are much rarer. And from what I can see, you have both." Ethan watched the conversation attentively, not fully understanding but sensing it was important for his mother. "Dad," Emma interrupted, "does this mean Sarah will work with you?" "Well," Robert smiled at his daughter, "that depends on her." Later that morning, after the kids left for school, Robert suggested that he and Sarah talk in his office. Helen offered to take care of Liam during the conversation. In the office, Robert assumed a completely different demeanor from the intimidating man Helen had faced hours earlier. He sat in the armchair next to Sarah, not behind the desk, creating a conversational atmosphere instead of an interrogative one. "Sarah, may I ask you some questions about your work experience?" "Of course." Sarah replied, still holding Liam, who had woken up in the middle of the conversation. Helen told me you work in cleaning. How do you manage 3 different jobs? Sarah explained in detail her routine, the hours of each job, how she calculated travel time, how she maximized her efficiency to meet all her obligations. Robert, accustomed to evaluating managerial competencies, immediately recognized the complex organizational skills Sarah had developed out of necessity. And how do you manage the household budget? Sarah described her homemade financial control system, notebooks where she recorded every expense, how she prioritized spending, how she found ways to save without compromising basic needs. Interesting, Robert murmured. You essentially created a resource management system that many small businesses would pay a lot to learn. I never thought of it that way, Sarah admitted. Robert stood up and went to a shelf, pulling out some reports. Sarah, can I show you something? He opened a financial report from the company, pointing to numbers and graphs. This is the operational cost analysis of one of our projects. Can you understand anything here? Sarah studied the numbers for a few minutes, furrowing her brow in concentration. Well, it looks like you are spending a lot on material waste. Look here, she pointed to a specific line. If these are unused materials, you are losing almost 15% of the investment per project. Robert looked at where she was pointing, then back at her. How did you come to that conclusion? It's the same principle I use at home. If I buy more food than we can eat before it spoils, I'm wasting money. The only difference is the size of the numbers. Impressive, Robert said genuinely. You identified in 5 minutes a problem that our analysts took weeks to notice. Sarah felt a wave of pride and confidence that she hadn't experienced in years. Really? Completely serious? Robert sat back down. Sarah, I would like to make you a proposal. How about starting by working part-time in our finance department? You could learn the system while applying your practical perspective. And if you want, the company could cover your return to college. Sarah felt her heart race. It was exactly the kind of opportunity she had dreamed of, but never believed was possible. But what about Liam? I can't leave him with babysitters and... Liam can come along, Robert interrupted. We can arrange a small space for him in the office. He wouldn't be the first baby to grow up learning about business. And my other jobs? You could gradually let them go as you feel secure in the new position. Robert leaned forward. Sarah, I'm not doing this out of charity. I'm doing it because I believe you can add real value to the company. Sarah looked at Liam sleeping in her arms, then back at Robert, trying to process the magnitude of the offer. Can I think about it? Of course, but Sarah. Yes? Stop underestimating your abilities. You managed to raise a wonderful child on your own, juggle multiple jobs, maintain a household, and still keep your dignity and kindness intact. That's no small feat. When Sarah left the office, she found Helen in the living room, organizing some papers on a side table. How did it go? Helen asked, noticing Sarah's confused expression. I think your husband just offered me the job of my dreams, Sarah said, still in shock. Robert can be many things, but he has an eye for talent, Helen smiled, and he was right about your abilities. Helen, can I ask you something? Of course. How did you know it would work out, bringing us here, betting on us this way? Helen paused, considering the question carefully. You know, Sarah, I think I recognized in you something that was missing in my life. Ethan and you have a genuine connection, an unconditional love. Emma and I had love too, but it was suffocated by formality, by social expectations. And Robert? Are you two going to be okay? I don't know yet, Helen admitted honestly, but this morning was the first real conversation we've had in years, so maybe. That afternoon, when Ethan returned from school, he found his mother radiant in a way he hadn't seen in a long time. "Mom, you're different. Did something good happen?" "Maybe, my love. Emma's dad offered me a job where I could use my brain, not just my hands." "Does that mean we're staying here?" Sarah looked around the house that had become a temporary refuge, but now felt very close to a home. "It means we have choices, Ethan. For the first time in a long time, we have real choices." Ethan hugged his mother, and in that moment, Sarah knew that regardless of what she decided about the job, something fundamental had changed in their lives. They were no longer just surviving. They were starting to thrive. 3 weeks passed since Sarah started working part-time at Anderson Construction. Her routine had completely transformed. Instead of waking up at 5 in the morning to rush between 3 different jobs, she now woke up at 7, had breakfast with the kids and Helen. Marina arrived at the office at 9, always carrying Liam in his portable baby carrier. The office had quickly adapted to the presence of the baby. Robert had arranged for a small crib to be installed in the finance department, and the staff took turns pampering Liam during breaks. Sarah discovered that working surrounded by colleagues invested in her. Success was a completely new experience. On that June Thursday, Sarah was reviewing cost spreadsheets when Sandra, the finance manager, approached her desk with an intrigued smile. "Sarah, I need to show you something interesting I found in the old files." Sandra opened a dusty folder and pulled out some yellow documents. "I'm organizing the company's historical files, and I found some construction contracts from the 90s. Look at this name here." Sarah took the document, and her eyes widened as she read, "Subcontract for electrical services, Johnson and Anderson Electrical Installations, technical responsible, Anthony Johnson." "Johnson is a common surname," Sarah said, though her heart raced. "But look at the signature." Sandra pointed to the end of the document. The signature was clear and elaborate. "Anthony Charles Johnson." Sarah felt her blood run cold. That was her father's full name, who had abandoned the family when she was just 5 years old. "Sarah, are you okay? You look pale." This could be my father," Sarah whispered, holding the document with trembling hands. "Seriously? What an incredible coincidence." "It's not a good coincidence," Sarah murmured, sitting heavily in her chair. "My father left us when I was a child. My mother never spoke of him again." Sandra sat in the chair next to her, realizing she had touched on something delicate. "Do you want me to research more about these contracts?" Sarah was silent for a long moment, looking at Liam sleeping peacefully in the crib. Part of her wanted to know, but another part feared what she might discover. "You can research," she finally said, "but discreetly. I don't want to involve others in this yet." As Sarah dealt with revelations about her past at the office, Helen was experiencing her own discoveries at home. Robert had started coming home earlier from work, eager to participate in the family routines he had ignored for years. That afternoon, he arrived home to find Helen in the garden with Ethan and Emma, helping them with a school project about plants. It was a simple domestic scene, but Robert watched from the window before joining them. "Dad!" Emma ran towards him. "We're planting beans to see how they grow. Ethan brought the idea from his old school." Robert knelt beside the children, observing the small pots carefully lined up. "And how does this experiment work?" Ethan, more comfortable with. Robert, after weeks of interaction, explained enthusiastically, "We plant some in the sun, others in the shade, some with lots of water, others with little. Then we'll see which grows better." "Interesting," Robert said genuinely. "It's like testing different business strategies." "Exactly," Ethan got excited. "My mom always says that life is like that too. Sometimes we need to try different ways until we find what works." Helen watched her husband interacting with the children, seeing a side of him she had forgotten existed. Robert had always been good with Emma when she was little, but after she grew a bit, He seemed to struggle to connect with her. "Robert," Helen said later, as they were tidying up the garden materials, "thank you for being more present." "No need to thank me, Helen. I should apologize for taking so long to realize what I was missing." "And what were you missing?" Robert looked at the children, who were now playing on the grass with Liam propped up between cushions, supervised by Ethan. "I was missing my family growing up. I was missing the chance to really know my daughter, and I almost lost my marriage too." Helen felt a wave of emotion she hadn't experienced regarding her husband in years. "Robert, can we rebuild this?" "I would love to try," he said, taking her hand for the first time in months. That night, during dinner, Robert made an announcement that surprised everyone. "Family," he said, looking around the table where they now always dined together, "I have a proposal for you." Everyone stopped eating, attentive. "How about we take a weekend trip? There's a resort in Lake Tahoe that welcomes families. We could rent a big house for all of us." Emma clapped her hands. "Really, Dad? Can I bring my new books?" "Of course you can." Ethan looked uncertainly between Sarah and Robert. "Can I go too?" "Of course you can, Ethan. You're part of this family." The word family lingered in the air for a moment. It was the first time someone had officially verbalized what everyone already felt. Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears. "Robert, Helen, are you sure?" "It's very generous." "Sarah," Helen said firmly, "stop thinking you don't deserve good things. You are part of this family just as much as any of us." Later that night, after the children had gone to bed, Helen and Sarah sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the stars. Liam slept peacefully in the stroller beside them. "Sarah, can I tell you a secret?" Helen said. "Sure." "I was thinking about asking for a divorce before you all arrived." Sarah turned, surprised. "Really?" "Robert and I were living like polite strangers. Emma was becoming a sad and lonely child. I felt completely useless." Helen sighed. "You saved my marriage, my relationship with my daughter, and my sanity. Helen, you literally saved us. Ethan and I were just surviving before. Now we are truly living." "It's funny how life works, isn't it? You needed stability, I needed purpose. Emma needed a brother. Ethan needed a complete family." "And Liam?" Helen smiled, looking at the baby. "Liam will grow up thinking he has always had two mothers, a protective older brother, a caring older sister, and a father." "Really?" "Helen, can I tell you something I discovered today?" Sarah shared about the document that Sandra had found, regarding the possibility that her father had worked for Robert's company years ago. "What an incredible coincidence!" exclaimed Helen. "Or maybe it's not a coincidence." "What do you mean?" "Sarah, maybe the universe has a way of putting the right people in the right place at the right time. Maybe you were always meant to be here." "Do you really believe that?" Helen looked at the house behind them, where Robert was helping Ethan with homework, while Emma read a story to her dolls, a scene of family life that seemed to have always existed but had actually begun only a few weeks earlier. "Yes," said Helen with conviction. "I believe some people are meant to find each other, and I believe our family, as unconventional as it may be, is exactly how it should be." Sarah rested her head on Helen's shoulder, feeling a deep peace she hadn't experienced since childhood. For the first time in her adult life, she wasn't planning her next move out of necessity or fear. She was simply living in the moment, surrounded by people who loved her unconditionally. "Helen?" "Yes?" "Thank you for letting us stay. Thank you for choosing to stay." They remained seated on the porch until late, two women from different worlds who had found in each other not just a friend, but a sister chosen by the heart, not by blood. And inside the house, three children slept peacefully, knowing they would wake up the next day in a place where they were loved, protected, and valued. The family none of them had planned had become the family they all had always needed. The weekend in Lake Tahoe happened 3 weeks later, marking not just a family trip, but a moment of consolidation of the bonds that had formed over the previous months. The house they rented was cozy and rustic, with a fireplace, a large garden, and a stunning view of the mountains. It was the kind of place where precious memories are effortlessly created. On the first night, while the children played board games in the living room and Liam slept peacefully on the couch, Sarah finally found the courage to tell everyone about the discovery of her father's documents. Robert listened attentively, then offered to help with the investigation. "Sarah, if you want, I can contact people who worked at the company back then. Maybe we can find out more about your father." "I don't know if I'm ready for that," Sarah admitted. "Part of me wants to know, but another part is afraid of what I'll find." Ethan, who had stopped playing to listen to the conversation, approached his mother. "Mum, no matter what you find out about your father, it won't change who you are. You're the best mum in the world, with or without a dad." Ethan's precocious wisdom made everyone smile, but it also brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Helen took her hand in silent support. "You know what I think," said Emma, getting up from the game table. "I think we already have a complete family here. We don't need anyone else." Robert watched his daughter with renewed pride. "Emma is right. Families aren't just about who gave us life, they're about who chooses to stay and care for each other." The next morning, as they walked along the mountain trails, Robert carrying Liam in a baby carrier, Helen and Sarah chatting animatedly, and Ethan and Emma running ahead, collecting interesting leaves, Robert made an observation that surprised even himself. "You know, this is the first time in years I haven't thought about work during an entire weekend." "And do you miss it?" Helen asked playfully. "Surprisingly, no. I'm discovering that quality time with family is much more rewarding than closing another deal." Sarah, who was walking beside them, watching Ethan teach Emma to identify different types of leaves, felt a wave of deep gratitude. "Robert, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course." "What made you change? When did you decide you wanted to be more present?" Robert stopped walking for a moment, adjusting Liam in the carrier. "You know, Sarah, seeing how you raised Ethan made me realize what I was missing. You sacrificed so much to be present in his life, and I was wasting my presence in Emma's life by choice. Robert, you haven't lost anything. Emma loves you, and now you have time to build an even stronger relationship." "That's true," Helen agreed. "And besides, now we have Ethan and Liam for you to know since they were little. It's a second chance." That afternoon, back at the rented house, a moment occurred that would be etched in everyone's memory forever. Liam, who had recently turned 2 months old, gave his first real smile, not just a reflexive grin, but a genuine and intentional smile directed specifically at Ethan, who was making funny faces at him. "He smiled!" Ethan shouted, euphoric. "Liam smiled at me!" Everyone gathered around the baby, who continued smiling as if he knew he was the center of attention. It was a moment of pure family joy that crystallized everything they had built together. "First official photo of the complete family," declared Helen, organizing everyone for a picture. Robert set the camera timer and ran to join the group. In the photo that resulted from that moment, 5 people and 1 smiling baby perfectly captured the essence of an unconventional yet deeply connected family. On the drive back to New York, Sarah made an important decision. "I want to investigate my father," she announced. "Not because I need him, but because I want to close this chapter of my life properly." "We'll support you in whatever you decide," said Helen. "And no matter what we discover," Robert added, "that doesn't change the fact that you're our family now." 2 weeks later, the investigation revealed surprising information. Anthony Johnson had indeed worked with. In the 90s, Robert had passed away in a car accident 5 years earlier when Ethan was only 2 years old. Through former employees, they discovered that he had become an alcoholic after leaving the family, struggled with addiction for years, and finally managed to rehabilitate himself shortly before his death. "He left a letter," said Sandra, handing a yellowed envelope to Sarah. "It was in his personal files at the company. It's addressed to you." With trembling hands, Sarah opened the letter her father had written but never sent. "My dear Sarah, if you are reading this, it means I found the courage to try to reach out to you, or that something happened to me before I could. I want you to know that there hasn't been a day in all these years that I haven't thought about you and your mother. I left you because I was destroying our family with my illness, but now I understand that abandoning you was the worst decision of my life. I heard that you had a son. I hope he has the father I couldn't be for you. If you can ever forgive me, know that my greatest regret was not being strong enough to fight for our family from the start. Always your father, with all the love I never knew how to express, Anthony." Sarah finished reading the letter with tears streaming down her face. Helen, who had read along with her, hugged her tightly. "He loved you," whispered Helen. "In his twisted way, he loved you." "Yes," agreed Sarah, wiping her tears, "and that's enough for me to forgive him." Ethan, who had been watching the scene, approached and hugged his mother. "Now you have an answer, right, Mom?" "I do, my love, and the answer is that some people fight against demons that are bigger than they are. It doesn't justify the wrong choices, but it helps to understand." That night during dinner, Robert made an announcement that crowned months of changes and discoveries. "Family," he said, standing up from the table. "Helen and I have been talking, and we would like to make an official proposal." Everyone stopped eating, attentive. "Sarah, Ethan, Liam, we would like you to officially become part of this family. Not as guests, not as a temporary situation, but as a real family." "What do you mean officially?" asked Sarah, although her heart already knew the answer. Helen stood up as well. "We want to adopt you, officially. Ethan and Liam would have the same rights as Emma, the same security, the same inheritance. And you, Sarah, would be my official sister, not just in heart." Ethan looked at Emma, who was beaming. "Does that mean we would be real siblings on paper too?" "Exactly," Robert confirmed. Sarah felt the world spin around her. It was more than she had ever dreamed possible. "But are you sure? It's a huge responsibility." "Sarah," said Helen, taking her hands, "you have turned our house into a home, our marriage into a family, our daughter into a loving big sister. The responsibility is ours to give back what you have given us. And what if you regret it?" "Impossible," Robert said with conviction. "In the last few months I have discovered what it means to be a true father, a true husband, and a true person. There's no going back from that." Emma stood up and hugged Ethan. "Please say yes. I've always wanted siblings, and now I can have two at once." Ethan looked at his mother, his eyes shining with emotion. "Mom, can we? Can we have a real big family?" Sarah looked around the table, at Robert, who had become the father Ethan had always deserved, at Helen, who had become the sister she never had, at Emma, who was the daughter of her heart she had always wanted, and at Liam, peacefully sleeping in the stroller, who would grow up knowing only unconditional love and stability. "Yes," she finally said, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, we want to be an official family." What followed was an explosion of joy, hugs, happy tears, and plans for the future. Ethan and Emma danced around the room, Robert and Helen kissed for the first time in months, and Sarah held Liam against her chest, whispering promises that he would grow up surrounded by more love than he could ever need. 6 months later, in a simple yet emotional ceremony at the courthouse, the adoption was finalized. Ethan Anderson, Liam Anderson, and Sarah Johnson officially became members of the Anderson family. But the last names were just formality. They were already family in the place that mattered most, in the heart. Helen continued to be active in volunteer work, but now with renewed purpose, focusing on organizations that helped single mothers. Robert reduced his travel and implemented a work-life balance policy at his company. Emma thrived as the big sister, developing admirable emotional maturity. Ethan grew in confidence and joy, maintaining his protective nature, but finally able to be a child. And Liam grew up in a home filled with love, laughter, and opportunities. Sarah finished her accounting degree, funded by the family, and became a minority partner in Robert's company. Together, they created a microcredit program for women entrepreneurs, especially single mothers, giving back to the community the opportunities that had transformed their own lives. 5 years later, sitting on the same porch where Helen and Sarah had shared confidences that first difficult night, they watched Ethan teach Liam to ride a bike, while Emma read a book. In the hammock, Robert worked in the garden, and a new baby, the result of the renewal of Helen and Robert's marriage, slept peacefully in the stroller. "Did you ever imagine it would be like this?" asked Helen, observing the scene of perfect family life. "Never," replied Sarah, smiling. "In my best dreams, I just wanted Ethan to have opportunities. I never imagined we would find a whole family." Life has a curious way of giving us exactly what we need when we need it most, doesn't it? It really does. And do you know what the most amazing part is? What? Sarah looked at Helen, her chosen sister, for the heart, your best friend, your partner in raising the kids. The most incredible part is that we saved each other. You saved me from poverty and loneliness. I saved you from emptiness and sadness. And together we saved our children from growing up incomplete. For Robert, we saved him from losing his family. And we all saved each other from living lives that weren't truly ours. As the sun set over the house that had become home for all of them, Sarah and Helen remained seated in silent companionship, watching the family they had built together. It wasn't a traditional family, but it was perfect in its imperfection, strong in its vulnerability, and united by the most powerful of all bonds, chosen love. Ethan ran up to them, sweaty and happy after Liam's bike lesson. "Mom, Aunt Helen, Liam can already stand on the bike by himself. He's learning super fast." "Of course he is," smiled Sarah, hugging her son. "He has the best teacher in the world." "And the best family in the world to support him," added Helen, embracing both. And in that moment, under the rosy sky of the New York sunset, an unconventional yet deeply connected family quietly celebrated the extraordinary journey that had taken them from strangers to relatives, from need to love, from survival to full prosperity. Sometimes the best stories are not about finding what we were looking for, but about discovering that what we needed was waiting for us in places we never thought to look. Please like, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and if you watched until here, comment "I watched until here," and share your opinion about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears on the final screen. It's going to be very exciting.